So I think we're live, but I lost my thing to get the right stuff on. Should be. Let's see if we are live. This is so professional, like the first YouTube live. I'm like trying to check. If people can see us and we're live, say hey in the chat. Let us know where you're from and all that kind of good stuff. I'm just checking my internet, but obviously it's been slow because that's what happens when you're trying to do live stuff. So let's see. I'm hoping it's not going to feed back as well. It looks like we're live. That's awesome. Hello, welcome everybody. This is Tea Time, a weekly show that I do every week. This is actually the first time I've done it on YouTube, so forgive us if we have tech issues, if something goes wrong or I mess up, which will probably happen. So yeah, I've been doing this show since the beginning of lockdown because I just think it's good to bring the community together and answer all of your questions about the business side of motion design. So say hey in the comments and let us know where you're from. Oh, I can see people are saying we're live, so that's good. Yeah, so like I said, I'll be here in the same place and same time every week if you want to join us next week as well. But I thought it'd be really interesting to bring on a little panel this week and talk about the hashtags animation paid me and mograph paid me, because I've been following them and it's been quite interesting to see all of the developments. We actually were a bit late because we were so excited to talk about all this stuff. Everyone's been like chatting about it already, so I'm really excited about this. So I have with me illustrator, director and animator Monique Wray, and I also have freelance illustrator and animator Lana Sketch. We decided to call her that because I've decided that I can't say her name and I'm very sorry about that. And creative director of School of Motion, Ryan Summers. So do you want to all introduce yourselves? Maybe Lana, you can start.
Hi, I'm Lana. I've been in the industry for about 5 or 6 years now. I've mostly been full-time at Animate for 5 years, and I've recently left them last year, and now I'm kind of doing my freelance journey as a illustrator, director, and animator as well in London, UK.
Great, thanks. Monique, do you want to go next?
Yeah, my name is Monique Wray. I'm an illustrator animator. Directing. I lived in San Francisco about 10 years and had kind of a really windy road. 3D stuff in the beginning of my career, and now I'm kind of dialed into variety of clients.
I think you're a little bit quiet. I don't know whether anyone let us know in the comments if Monique's a bit quiet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. That's better. Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted
all of that, or?
Well, I just wanted everyone to be able to hear you, so maybe a little bit, yeah.
Been in the industry for 10 years, originally from Miami. Did a bunch of 3D stuff in the beginning, and now I'm more dialed into more 2D focused stuff and work with direct to client, a mix of stuff, and agency is a bulk of the sort of clients that I work with.
Great, yeah, that was much better. That was much louder. Thank you. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Ryan Summers. I'm creative director at School of Motion, but before that I've been CD at studios like Digital Kitchen and Imaginary Forces, and I've freelanced quite a bit in between both of those. And I've been dying to have this conversation about rates for a long time.
Yeah, cool. It sounded like someone had like an ice cream van outside, so that's fun. Awesome. Yeah, so we've got a few questions that I'll start off with, but I imagine that the conversation is just going to flow. So if anyone has questions and stuff in the comments too, or like comments they want to join in the conversation, please do that. I'd like to start with what you all think of the animation paid me and mograph paid me hashtags. Do you feel like this can bring like a positive change in our industry? Because I know there's been like a couple of different opinions on this, so I thought it'd be interesting to start with that.
Yeah, I think it's positive, especially being that, as a Black woman, am I always going to get paid what I deserve? And the best way to make sure that happens is to make sure I have the information and empower myself to push to get the right rates, right? And the only way to get that information is if we're sharing info with each other, right? So I think it's incredibly important that, we be as transparent as possible of our rates.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it definitely makes sense. I think because I saw a few things on the Animation Paid Me one that people were saying that their studios were telling them to take their rates down and stuff like that. I just wondered if we could talk about that a little bit. I just found that, I don't know, it's kind of sort of almost a bit worrying in a way, but yeah, I sort of understand it as well. It's hard really. I just wanted to know what you all thought of that.
I mean, I think it's a conversation that's been dying to have happen, for a long time. Like Monique said, you can't really negotiate unless you know what the baseline is, right? I mean, I know when I moved to LA to kind of really get in motion design, I'd worked for 10 years doing CG and working in video games, but I kind of reset myself back to the bottom, not knowing what the ranges were. And it was really interesting because I talk to people all the time, and I felt really big imposter syndrome, the same way I hear people now. And it was mostly because I didn't know, is my skill set matching what the rates are locally? Is it matching what I could be going for? And it got to the point where even when I made it in, I very specifically remember being called out by an old school freelancer that was, a high level. I was having a private conversation with someone in the room and said, am I too low? Am I too high? I want to keep getting booked. Should I change my rate? And the moment I mentioned a number across the room, I had somebody scream to me and said, shut up. And then literally come up to me like, we don't do this, and explained why. And it really it kind of frightened me a little bit. And thankfully I had someone pull aside, separately at lunch and kind of, set me straight. But it was really eye opening that for an industry that shares so much, right? That's one of the things that really makes motion design unique. We share our techniques, we share our tools, we inspire each other. Rates for the longest time until I feel like in the last week or so was kind of taboo. Right. And it really felt like a control mechanism. And I'm so glad that it's happening, because I don't think anyone should feel forced to talk about it. But I feel like if you do want to, everybody should feel comfortable having a conversation publicly or privately.
I'm curious, Ryan, what year was that when that happened?
That was probably 7 or 8 years ago, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
It was right when I started at Imaginary Forces.
Because I feel like we're better about it now. We're not where we need to be at all, right? Especially being that Hayley just said that studios are telling people to take their rates down off of this conversation we're having on Twitter, which blows my mind. But I wonder, if you had done that now, would the response have been the same?
I think that it would still be the same, because as designers and creative directors and animators, our goal is to learn the note behind a note, right? When you hear something, there's probably something else driving it. And I still think that control mechanism of trying to squash information is still there. And it may not be as many people, but the desperation behind it definitely is. What really turned out was the freelancer who really accosted me, as I became a creative director and got to hire people, I got access to seeing what people's rates were to make important decisions. And it turns out his rate was astronomically high. And really what happened is it becomes, like I said, a control mechanism where if you want to maintain a very high, if not maybe artificially high rate, there's probably a fear in some people's minds that they have to keep everybody else lower to make room for that. So I never had that conversation as a follow-up years later, but I can imagine that it still exists. And if you are hearing studios say take the rates down, it's probably coming from that. They don't want everybody to realize that that baseline is probably much higher than people realize.
Yeah, I've noticed even when, for example, a studio or a client emails me and I say okay, I'm available in these dates, whatever, and this is my day rate. And a lot of the times they just try to barter it down as well. So even if you do have a very high extraordinary rate, it can still be, kind of beaten down, or you can just negotiate what kind of rate it is. So even I've put what my freelance day rate is, but it varies so much from client to client. It's not always, it's in that range, but it's never that one number.
Yeah, go on, Monique, sorry.
Yeah, and even to your point, Lana, a lot of us do some direct to client stuff versus agency stuff versus studio stuff. And I know my rate varies significantly between those three, right? You know, and I usually personally find that if it's direct to client, that pays the most, right? And I usually have the least sort of friction around sort of the conversation around my rate when it comes to direct to client. When it's agency, I think that's in the middle, you know, and studio, I feel is like at the bottom, right? And I think it's really just about all the middlemen, you know, being cut out. And now I'm direct to client and there's no, because really it's sort of the client will hire the agency, which will hire the studio, right? And by the time they get to me, they have, you know, limited budget that they want to work with, you know? So that's a really good point that, you know, you may have a rate for one client, but it may be and should be, you know, very different for another client, you know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it depends. Like if, for example, if you've been not booked for like a month, you would probably take a job when you know there's nothing on the horizon for a lower rate, for example. There's nothing, I mean, there's nothing like terrible about that in the sense like if you need to pay that rent, you need to pay that rent. But in terms of, yeah, if that client comes back to you next time when you're fully booked and your rate is a lot higher, it'll be a lot harder to have that conversation with them. I feel like they'll be like, well, where is this coming from? Why is your like rate or budget higher this time?
I would say have that. Sorry, Ryan.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I would say have that conversation too with them up front still, right? Because this happens, you know, like you're saying, you know, it's been a dry couple of months, something comes through and, you know, I feel inclined to accept it. And I think even then you should say to them, hey, this is much lower than I would typically accept. Just having that conversation with them so that when they do hopefully come back to you, you know, then you can, you know, give them your usual rate and there won't be kind of this sort of like confusion from them. And even if they don't come back to you, I think it's important to educate them, right? Because if they go to another artist, you don't want them to expect that sort of lower rate from another artist, right?
Exactly.
They understand what the standards are. When
so
anyone.
I'm so glad, Monique, I'm so glad you're saying that because I think it's an important psychological discussion to have for us because, again, like with that imposter syndrome conversation, a rate is a direct reflection of your value to the people who might hire you. And just because a studio or a client has a lower budget, your value doesn't lessen, right? The what you give as an animator or designer shouldn't be considered cheaper or less. And it's a psychological thing, but even when you're filling out your timesheets or you're billing somebody, don't bill it at the lower rate, bill it as a discount. Like if your day rate is $500 a day, and they say, well, we need it at 400. Figure out what that percentage is and bill them at 500 and then have a line item at the end that says 20% discount. Because you never know when, exactly what you're saying, Monique, you never know that the next time the studio hires you, if there's a different person or a different situation, but you do know the constant is your value. And the next time they come back, they're going to say, oh, can we get the discount? And you can say, no, I can't give you the discount, right? But at least that's firmly established that's the rate. And it's a tactic and it's a psychological kind of mindset. But I feel like we fall into that trap of so often, if you don't get booked, that doesn't mean your value is less. It means that maybe you need to be doing more marketing, or maybe you need to be reaching out to different markets, you know, in different fields that your skill still has the same value and not just to be sitting back and waiting for the next one to come in.
Yeah, I've definitely made that mistake of like not telling them that this is a discounted rate.
Right.
So, and that would, go to really tough conversations later on with the client.
Yeah, I think the thing that I always come back to, what I used to do a lot, like, because Lana was saying about, you know, they're going to try and haggle with you. And it's, I think Jessica Heish or someone like that said, if people don't haggle with you or like negotiate, not haggle's not the right word, but negotiate with you, then, you know, you're probably not charging enough. And if they kind of just say no straight away, then maybe it's too much and stuff like that. So we can kind of use that as a gauge. But also what I used to do is say, you know, a bit more than I actually wanted, and then would have kind of a base that I would go to, and then that you've sort of got some negotiation room in your head, but then you know how low to go and you know where your cutoff point is for everybody. So even if it's like, I don't know, some people sometimes say like, oh, maybe it should be less for charities and stuff like that. But at least you know where your like baseline is, depending on your expenses and stuff like that, because that's essentially what we need to work out as. People don't really think about that. They just think, oh, what was I paid when I was full-time? Okay, let's try and divide that by like whatever 265. I don't know. Like, do you know what I mean? Like days in the year and stuff like that.
That's another psychological thing, though. I'm glad you brought that up too, Hayley, because I've been on the other side, right? Like I've been a CD at a large shop, and I've sat with the producer where we need to put together a team of 5. And we're like, well, we could either get 5 or we get 4 of the right people because of the budget. But I see that all the time where people do that simple math and they forget that, you get lower compensation full time in terms of salary because your compensation is way more, right? Those days off, that's part of your compensation, right? It's considered part of your salary, the 401k kind of contributions or whatever. So you're already calculating at a disadvantage if you just say, well, I work 265 days divided by X amount of time. That's not your value. That's not your day rate. Shouldn't be done through that simple math. But I see that mistake happen all the time. I made that mistake. If I told you what I accepted as a salary at Imaginary Forces as like a senior level art director just so I could be staff, it was so I was so backwards. I wish this conversation would have been happening back then.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of these companies know that too, right?
Oh. Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
They know that, we're a big deal and you're going to feel like obligated to just take whatever we give you, essentially.
And they'll play every trick. They'll play every trick. Where would you get to work with these people? When would you get to work on these projects? But then no one does the post-mortem 6 months after getting signed full-time. They're like, am I working with that cool creative director?
Right.
Or am I working on the title sequence or the
Once
cool
you
project?
peek behind the curtain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's like, sorry, I just interrupt you, but I just had that exact experience when I was working. I was like, I want to work for this cool animation studio. And then you get in there and you're like, oh, it's actually, they're not doing the cool projects like every day. You know what I mean? And then you just took like a lower rate just to do the same kind of thing that you maybe would have got paid more. Like an ad agency or something like that, So
it's like celebrities, like those studios that in your head they're one thing, but in reality it could be like that thing, but also a bit of something else.
I wanted to ask Lana and Monique. I want to follow up with that too. Like, have you guys this happened to me every time I was freelancing. You don't get a job for 3-4 weeks. You're like, I just got to take something. You take something, and maybe you take it at a reduced rate or a discount, and then what ends up happening? 2 days later, you get 3 calls that people need you at the full rate for a longer amount of time. That happened to you guys, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's where that whole, like, I just have to, if we can get past that, like, oh, I'll just take anything at whatever rate they give
Scarcity, right? What is it called? The scarcity effect or something like that, where it's just like, I got to take everything and anything, right? But you end up hurting yourself, right? Because to your point, if you're marketing yourself, if you're doing all the things you need to be doing, reaching out, the work will come, right? You just, in a sense, have to be just patient, right? And not just grab anything, but you have to also be real with yourself and make sure you're doing the work in the sense of marketing and putting yourself out there and not just, behind your computer, just working and not tossing work out so people can see it, right? You got to do all that stuff, but if you're doing it, you'll get work eventually that is at the appropriate rate eventually. It'll come.
Yeah, that's part of the issue of like why your day rate or budgets should be decent, so you can live through those periods of time where you don't you can say no and wait for that decent thing.
That's a really interesting point that in this whole hashtag that I've seen a lot is the disparity between people's rates and even geographically. Like I know some UK animators that see US rates and they're blown away, but then you also have to factor in the fact that we have to pay for health insurance and you have to cover those times when you're down. Hayley, is there any discussion to really be had just about that? Like getting the context behind, if you're following, like I'm doing it right now, I'm in TweetDeck and I'm following the hashtag.
Yeah.
What should we be looking at or thinking about when we see this stream of just data and information? Like in some ways I feel like it's positive, but I think it could be super overwhelming too and scary when you see all this.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna bring up as well. Is everyone's looking at the rates, and especially so I've seen a few comments, which is why I wanted Lana to come on as well, because I was like, we got to get a few UK peeps in here, because I feel like the whole, between the US and the UK, like considering we think like, okay, in London, the kind of living cost is maybe similar to New York or something like that. There's always this kind of conversation going on, and everyone's just going, oh my God, have you seen the US rates? And they're all like, sad. And yeah, I just wanted to talk a bit about that as well, because I'm always trying to push on the podcast, all the time, like, come on, UK people, let's try and charge more, but it's really hard. And I think it comes from, I've definitely had like a lot of animation studios say like, oh, we can only do like $250 a day and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that's not enough. And how much people charge like in London. So why are you budgeting for that? But I think it's like Monique said earlier, where they're almost already the bottom of the barrel, if that makes sense. So these budgets are getting like cut in half from like the client, the ad agency, right, then the animation studio, then the freelancer. And I don't really know I don't really know how to battle that, apart from like us knowing our worth more and trying to like maybe get up that ladder a bit more. I'd love to hear what you all think about that as well, and the kind of US UK conversation. That's sort of two questions, but
I think these studios are seeing kind of this blowback effect of the fact that if you're a certain class of animator and illustrator and you market yourself and you know how to engage with clients, you can essentially be a studio.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And then you kind of just eliminate all of these sort of middlemen, and the client, frankly, is I think now more okay with working with an independent artist than they've ever been. You don't have to kind of act like you're this studio with tons of employees. You can be real and say, it's just me, I hire someone else, we're gonna get the job done still. And I think they're seeing this effect that a lot of independent artists are going this route, right? So the talent pool is going to get sucked dry, right? And what are they going to do if they don't have talented artists that they can hire? Because we've all now awakened to the fact that we don't need them, essentially.
Yes, it's not that different than the music industry, right? Like I made this argument and try to like sound the like warning bell at Digital Kitchen when I was there, that in a world where the software is available, the hardware is readily available and cheap, the networking capabilities are basically democratized. What is a studio anymore? It's its people and it's its reputation, right? So I highly encourage studios to just undercut artists and go ahead and try to lowball them and see in a year or two, like, what are you? What do you have left? Right? Because we all have access to the same things. We're all learning more about business. We're all learning more about networking and marketing. So the playfield is so much more level, at least in that sense. It's not level in a lot of other senses, but it is open for us to go and take it, right? Like, why should we have to have our rates either be stagnant or lower because of bad business decisions from studios who either are very poor at organizing and planning their jobs and bidding their jobs, frankly, or haven't changed with the times in terms of workflow and styles? Like, just because you're working with the same people and the same style, why should I pay the price? I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, a lot of it is in like the marketing of it. You can be one person, but be a studio. It just depends how you market yourself. If you're gonna, in the language, the verbiage that you use for your marketing, it's like, oh yeah, I'm this not very experienced person, whatever. Of course, that's the number they'll come up with. Oh, they don't seem very confident in what they're doing, so I'm not gonna risk giving them a big budget or something like that. So a lot of it is in like hyping yourself up to the client.
Yeah,
and just understanding your value, like that's the deep-seated imposter syndrome. I'm an artist, but I don't even know if I'm that good, so how could I even be a business person? Like, the best example I can give is like I won a $25 million job for my client, and our studio received, I think, like $4 million of it. And our client never knew this, but the entirety of the job was run by me in a room full of whiteboards with the same freelancers from my same Rolodex that I could have called if it was me in this room.
Right.
Right. And when I really woke up to that a year and a half, 2 years into the process, was like, wow, we're actively actually trying to hide the fact that it's basically just me and my friends running this job, to the point where, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it, to the point where the one time the client actually came into the office, we hired and brought in 8 freelancers who really weren't even working on the job to just make the studio look like we were paying for more people to be there. That's how desperate and ridiculous studios actually are right now in certain situations.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
This is like, have you seen this thing on Vice where they went to North Korea and there's just people on the computers not doing anything, just on like Google search?
Yeah.
This is all a setup.
But I mean, I can tell you at the same time, that studio that I worked at doesn't exist anymore. Right?
Right.
Like the change isn't, it's not that the change is coming, the change is here and people are trying to find a way to stem it. Where on the inverse, if they could have just really doubled down on creative, doubled down on the talent and the value those people were bringing, there's a very high possibility that studio would still be open instead of playing all these other kind of crazy games. So they're learning the lesson right now too.
And it's so true to your point that so many of these studios anyway, you know, they win these big jobs and it just ends up being 1 or 2 people that pull it off at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And they're probably the people who are not getting paid a lot.
That aren't getting paid. They're at $250 a day rate,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
That's what full-time is a lot of the times. When you're full-time at a place, and especially if you don't know your value yet, that's definitely is used. That's
where you have to do that math though, right? That's where the statement Monique said at the beginning, like, data is the thing that's the great equivalator. Once I got access to how much we were getting paid versus when I saw what they were charging for me versus what I was actually seeing as a result, that's where everything breaks down. If more artists had access or understanding of what your real value was to the studio that you're working for, freelance or staff, I think it would just accelerate this push to be like, well, I'm either going to definitely charge more, or why don't I go and just do it myself?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely had that because I started Animate 5 years ago, and it was still like a small studio. So I was involved in all the kind of meetings with the client to kind of get me experienced in like talking to them more freely and talking creative as well. And I would see all those numbers. I would see the budgets and how they break them down. They would ask me like, oh, how long would this actually take? And then they pull the numbers together. And even though I was aware of those, I knew what my salary was, and it was a bit strange, but I kind of understood that because I was like on a lower level of experience, and I didn't know at that point what kind of salary anyone else was. It was I kind of just brushed it under the rug.
Yeah, I feel like when I used to work full time, because I wasn't very confident, like when I started out, and now I'm just like pushing myself to do these like lives and stuff like that. But I really didn't feel like I could ask for like a promotion and that kind of thing. Like just when you're new in a job as well, and you're like kind of at a university or school, you don't know that you kind of have to say like, hey, give me a pay rise. Like I deserve this. And things like that. It took me so long to kind of realize that and know that I had to kind of demand to not be a junior motion designer anymore and stuff like. And now when I think about that, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like how did that even happen? And I remember like one point where I went from one junior motion designer role full time to another junior motion designer role. To be fair, it was like an internal production company who worked for Google, so it seemed like a step up, but really I should have been like, well, now I'm like a middleweight, I have some kind of experience. But I think it's because I was like, oh well, I worked at a sports broadcasting company, so I felt like I only had sports experience. Do you know what I mean? Even though it's like transferable and stuff like that. So it's just a lot about confidence and that kind of thing. I just wanted to like talk about some stuff in the chat because there's a lot of chat going on. So there's a few questions, and Brad said, is there a percentage you think artists and companies could use to calculate the day rate versus salary? Which I think is hard because they're so hard to like compare the two. I don't know whether anyone has any thoughts on that.
I mean, as much as I'm sitting here like lambasting the studios, I don't think it's their responsibility to think of you first, right? Like I think you have to understand. One big thing I try to tell people all the time is that when you have permission to negotiate, right? Like when you go to buy a car and there's a sticker price, you don't just buy it for the sticker price. The first thing you do is you start negotiating, right? And you can treat your career that way. You should think of it that way. And then kind of be on top of that, that compensation isn't just salary, right? Like you can argue for a lot more. You can argue for hard requirements and soft requirements, like hard requirements being days off, PTO, 401k contribution, but those soft requirements too of like, I want to know what my career track is. I want to have 3-month check-ins with my supervisor. I want to know who my supervisor is. I want to know what I'm going to be kind of evaluated on so that I can say in a year, did I go up the track? Is there a track? Is somebody actually holding me back because they're not giving me a fair review? Like those are all things that when you negotiate, it shouldn't just be like, how much money do I get and could I work on a cool project? And that's not really on the studio. That's on you to kind of start to evaluate. But the first part is like knowing the data and then giving yourself permission to start kind of evaluating that.
I think so much of it too is as artists, we're afraid to think of sort of the business aspect of things. And it's not natural for us, right? Like, you know, we're like, I'm just happy to be here and be making money off of anything that has to do anything with art, right? Which is like the wrong mindset, you know, like this is our livelihood, right? We have to really readjust that sort of way of thinking and really incorporate business into it, which is easier now than it's ever been. There's so much content that exists right now that's directed towards creative people who are business people, you know, which really should be all of us, that it's like an infinite amount of info, you know, that you can attain really easily.
Yeah, and if you're like calculating something like that, you are your own producer. Sometimes you do your own taxes. I pay someone to do my taxes, so that's
very good.
Another thing on top of that. Plus, you do your own invoices, estimates, client interaction, marketing. You're the one person that does all of those things. And that takes time. That takes your effort, takes your talent as well to do the For example, you can do like maybe do a little GIF or something as marketing, and that takes time as well. And even though it will help you get the work, you kind of need to factor it. It's not easy to say like, okay, you need to add 20% to your full time. That's not, there's never going to be, at least as of now, there's not going to be a clear cut percentage of how much it is. It's everyone's kind of doing their own thing. That's why we're kind of talking about it right now.
But do you really think people are doing their own thing? Because I just saw like there's some people in the chat talking about like US versus UK rates and stuff like that. And I feel like one of the problems is, right, so when I went freelance, I kind of got a load of people in the pub that I knew who were freelance. And I said, oh, what do you charge? You know, like, because I don't know what the hell I'm going to charge kind of thing. And then they said like, you know, at the time it was like 300 a day in London, stuff like that. This was a few years ago. I think that's probably still pretty much the case, which is kind of depressing to me because I always tried to raise my rate like every year after that. But then one time I said to this guy that I knew, and I said, hey, I'm going to charge $350 now. Like, that's how much I'm going to charge, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh my God, you can't charge $350. People will like say that, you know, they won't give you a break if you make like a little mistake or something like that. They'll expect like so much more and stuff. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And then I did charge $350, and most of the time it was absolutely fine. So that is even like, I'm not saying that's great. I'm just saying
Hayley, I had the same conversation, but about I was talking about my US rate because I just went freelance and I was getting a lot of emails from companies from the US, and I knew that there's good budgets there, especially if they're from New York or LA. And I went like on a Slack channel and I was like, oh, I'm gonna charge this much. Is that okay? Do you think, like, looking at my stuff, do you think that's right? And they were like, yeah, if you charge like more than that, it's gonna be really tough. Literally the same words, like, oh, if you charge this much, they're gonna be really on you, like hounding you for that rate. And I kind of went and charged slightly more than that, and no
Mhm.
one ever kicked a fuss. No one ever
Yes,
tried to
yes.
barter me down yet.
Can I
Yeah, I've not
just
had problems yet.
I feel like as much as we're telling everybody that you should talk to other people and you should get the information, I listen to a lot of podcasts about screenwriters, and everybody who wants to become a screenwriter for feature films, they're desperate. They're hungry to know everybody's story, like how they got in. And one of the best podcasts I heard gave me said this metaphor that I think extends to this really well. Everybody's story about how they found the door, got in the door, it's great to learn and it's great motivation. But when they walk through that door closes behind them and disappears, right? Like one person's experience in life has nothing to do with what the upside is for you, because they're not working in the same environment. They don't have the same skill set. And the thing we always forget about all the time, your personality, like when I hire people, half of it's for their skill set. The other half is for what they bring to the table besides After Effects and Cinema 4D. Anybody telling you what your value is has no idea, because they're not you. They don't know who you have available to work with. And that's why, like we've said this, think like a business. The three things I tell people, like think about three things when you're doing it and try to separate it from your art skills. Think about your opportunities, think about your value, and think about the risks, right? Like most people would think there's no risk in going full time because you have stable money coming in. But the risk is you're going to get stuck. You're going to be stagnant. All those freelance opportunities that people now don't come to you because they know you're no longer freelance. You have the risk of missing out on those 5, 6, 7 different clients that may take you to where you want to go, may get you the rate, may get you the job. So those three things, like the opportunity, your personal value beyond just your drawing skills or animating skills, and then that risk, you really have to think about those. And like every 3 months, every 6 months, whether it's freelance or work, like at a staff position, you should always be evaluating those all the time and thinking about them. And like, is the opportunity, are you getting bummed because you're at staff and you see opportunity going by? Do you feel like your value is getting limited because you're getting stuck doing the same job over and over because that's the benefit to the studio? They're making so much money and you just being really good at one thing. You have to think about that. And I don't think we talk about it enough to realize it. The amount of conversations I hear people saying, should I learn Houdini versus should I figure out how to like network?
Yes.
Like they're two totally different things, but the value in like learning how to do that is way more high sometimes than just learning the next tool or getting better at, the one technique.
Yeah, and the risk too, if you've been freelancing for some time and you take a staff role, if you do get laid off, you're going to have to start from the beginning again, right? And kind of get this business going again. So there are so many risks. I'm curious to Lana and Hayley. You guys are talking about the rates in the UK, and Lana, you mentioned it. I'm curious, do you guys seek out more US clients to kind of combat that, especially now that we're realizing remote is not a big deal, right? Because everything's going on business as usual and everyone's at home, right? Is that something that you guys, seek out to kind of get those higher budgeted projects?
Do you want to answer that, Lana, and then I can chip in afterwards?
Go first.
Okay. I was going to say, so I have a mastermind program, so I talk to a lot of people from around the world all the time. And I think that everybody is saying like quite a lot, like, oh, how can I like have, people from other countries as well, not like just the UK, but like, how can I have a more worldwide kind of, client base, because maybe the rates are better in different countries and stuff like that. Like people from other countries say that about the UK sometimes as well, obviously, where you don't get paid as much as the UK. And so it doesn't just apply to the US, but I think there are people in the US who work with US clients because they get paid more. But I'd still think it's quite difficult to do that, like unless you're kind of really well known in the industry and like online and that kind of thing, which I think, comes down to us thinking about, okay, how can we get out of this idea of I'm just going to email people and then they're going to hire me, So I'm working on a course right now that's in beta, and it's all about this bit before you kind of get to the hiring bit. Like, how do you make people aware of you? And then how do you attract them to you? And then how do you convert them from prospects into clients? It's basically like a sales funnel, that you have in marketing and all that kind of stuff. but I'm trying to convert that so that motion designers can understand it and understand how to use all of these different tools that we have, like social media, content marketing, like all of this great stuff that everybody, even like SEO and stuff like that we aren't utilizing to get our names out there, and all of these different things, and just teaching people that there's not one way to freelance, there's not one way to charge, and there's not one way to market yourself. You need to build a system around how to get the perfect clients for you and how to keep that consistent. And the main thing about getting consistent clients, which I just want to shout at everybody, like tell the whole world, is like, you need to be consistent in your outreach, right? Everybody who's on this live now, like if you're not making time every week to reach out to clients, to do stuff on social media, to be part of the industry, to give back and all of that stuff, that's why you aren't getting consistent clients. And it's scary, and we don't want to be like, oh, look at me, but it's not like that. That's why I think it's good to be part of the community, part of conversations like this, because this all helps you to get hired in the end. Sorry, I feel like I went on a bit of a soapbox.
No, that's great. I mean, I think consistency is an awesome goal. And then once you find consistency, that gives you the runway to be targeted, right? Like I think, Monique, you're asking, like, how do you get, or should you go get US clients? And I think it's that question of like, maybe it's not even just US clients, but the kind of work you want, right? Like we all stare at the same like shops or the same demo reels, of people are like, man, how do they do that job and that job and that job? And I'm not seeing any boring jobs. I'm not seeing any like ones you just take for the
meal, one for the
real. Exactly. Like there's people who are just like, it's always for the real. And I think part of it comes down to, once you have the confidence that work will come in, and the levers you can pull, as a company or as a business to get that in, that gives you the freedom to say like, well, I know I have these 7 people that I can call on that know me and know what I'm trying to do. Maybe I don't do work for 3 months because I know I have the runway. And when I come back up for air, those people come, but I'll become up changed. I'll have personal work, or I'll have another piece or a new demo reel. I feel like that's how that mystery of those people or those studios that do that all the time, they have a plan. Like consistency is a goal, but then that goal is a means to like the next step or the next level.
Yeah, consistency is definitely a point. And what you said before, Ryan, like, even though, might be like an amazing artist animator, but if you're really difficult to work with and you're not consistent in how people can predict your behaviors, oh, is he going to send me that rough of that scene that I send them today or tomorrow, or like what's happening? You got to be kind of consistent in how you conduct yourself in that work as well. I think I read somewhere it's like, oh, if you go get a haircut and they give you coffee every time, but one of those days they don't give you that cup of coffee, you'll be like, what's going on, Like it's like a really weird example, but it kind of rings true. Like you have to be consistent in, even if it's like direct to clients, that you got to be give them a consistent experience every time they come to you. Of course, you do need to like improve and be like, okay, my rate is going up, and kind of prove with that consistency and improvement of your process that it's worth that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just reading loads of comments. Julie Kraft is saying the community is everything. I really believe in that, because I think like when I started as well, one thing that I started this project called Bingomation, which seems really silly now, but basically it was where different animators made gifs based on bingo calls. Probably some people here remember it or something like that. It took like 4 years to complete. It was ridiculous because it was like 90 people and I didn't know anyone, so I just had to go around and email everyone. But it gave me an excuse to email loads of animators, and then I became friends with them, and then we all like started sharing work with each other and stuff like that. I think that's kind of how I know Lana, like through a similar sort of groups. And that just like helped me a lot with my freelance career, and also the fact that I like worked full time for 7 years. Don't recommend that to everyone, but I'm telling people like, don't do what I do, do what I tell you to do. Don't do what I did, sort of thing. But yeah, like it's just, I don't know, there's just so much sort of information and so many different angles to all of this. Sometimes it's hard to kind of get to the bottom of it, but I think it's because there's so many different ways that you could charge and stuff like that. And what I wanted to talk about, we did recently a podcast with Blair Enns, and it was amazing because he just kind of opened my mind to different ways of charging and things like that. Like a lot of people will have heard people talking about value-based pricing and stuff, which I think is a really interesting thing. And a lot of people in our mastermind have started doing like tiered pricing models for their clients, more kind of niche direct clients, which I think is really, really interesting. And kind of providing them more with a package and that kind of thing. And I'm just really excited to see that stuff starting to happen. And I don't know whether it's because of me and like talking about this stuff, and then those people come to my mastermind and then they talk to me about it, or do you know what I mean? I'd just be interested to know if other people are thinking about that, and it's not just like a funny, you know, like a feedback loop kind of thing, if that makes sense.
That's like part of gaining that confidence, isn't it? Like being like, I'm writing this down because I know I'm worth that much, or it's kind of, and I think talking through with other people does help you gain that a little bit, even if they don't give you the correct numbers that you might want with the right percentages and everything. It will kind of get you going in the right direction, you know, and upping your rates and not lowering them down.
Yeah, this is where I feel like small teams of people or just solo freelancers have a really strong opportunity to hopscotch over the old and long established studios that have lots of overhead, whether it's value-based pricing or it's going back to the idea of like hunting for opportunity. I think we get so caught up in all the tools we have to learn and catching up to styles that we think of the very narrow, like, what can I do to make something for someone? But just like I was talking about, like when you hire people for their personality, I think what happens a lot of times is that you work with a client or you work with an agency and you give away the stuff that's worth the most valuable. You come up with a concept, you come up with an idea, and they're like, oh, that's great. I'm going to run that by my team. And all of a sudden you change their hashtag because of some work that you did, or you had a conversation and you open their eyes to a new way they could be marketing something. And then you realize like the real value is you can make this piece, but then you can come up with a concept, or even beyond that, you can be helping them with the strategy of how the entire marketing approach goes, or the way they're viewing the product itself. And I think we either don't give ourselves permission to think that way, or we discount that as like, that's what I need to give away to be able to just get the next booking to make the thing. And I think that that's what agencies are struggling, or big studios are struggling to try to rebrand themselves as. Like you see a lot of companies that were production studios or animation studios. Like if you look at Buck, the word animation doesn't show up on their website anywhere because they're trying to rebrand themselves as strategy and like agency minus ad buy. Like they're trying to be that person that studio that they put their arm over their shoulder, like, here, we'll help you solve any problem. But I think because we are having more of these direct relationships and direct like conversations, we are uniquely positioned right now because everything else is democratized to grab for that and not just be I can make an animation faster than the person next to me, or, oh, that style, I can replicate that for you. I think we're doing ourselves a huge disservice by, even as a solo entrepreneur or a solo artist, not starting to think that way.
Yes. Yeah, I think Blair, is it ends or how do you say it, Hayley?
I don't know. I think it's ends.
I think his book is excellent. His content is excellent. And I think it's just, to your point, we bring so much value. We're not just making a thing that's just going to poof in the air, right? These clients are making money off of what we've made for them, right? Sometimes we're developing characters that live with their business forever, right? Like, this is so much value that we don't even realize we're providing. And I think that book and his content is really great sort of primer to that concept, you know, of not just thinking about yourself as just like day rates. There's more value that we're bringing to the table than that, you know?
I try to find different metaphors to teach people this, and partially because the industry is so many white, bald dudes that look like me, I end up using the comic book metaphor where Marvel Comics had great artists in the 60s and 70s, and they got paid a page rate. They got paid to draw a thing. But the thing that they actually made were the characters, the ideas that still live now, that generate billions and billions of dollars a year, that those artists who thought up, created, literally gave away, received no compensation for. I feel like we're in that kind of like just awakening moment of like, there are the Jack Kirbys and the Stan Lees and all these different people of the motion design world that are just giving it away because they just feel like I'm just lucky enough to do art for a living. And we have that psychology just drilled into us, even at school. Like, I don't hold studios accountable, but I do hold schools accountable for not teaching us this mindset, not teaching us, like, you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to go 4 years to a school, and they are not teaching you that
there's no business conversation at all.
Nothing.
I feel
no, like
you know, which is crazy.
What you make for a studio is a product of what they're paying you for, right? They're not paying you for the animation. They're paying you for the potential discoveries that you can make or the potential ideas, but they're not telling you that, right? That's why so many studios focus on project rates, which is a whole other discussion to have about being careful around that. But I do think that it's a bigger discussion. It challenges just what the industry is and how we think of ourselves and our business. But I do think there are metaphors in a lot of other creative arts industries that have learned this lesson that we could be looking to.
But you know what that reminds me of? Sometimes when, I would work direct to client, and at the end of it, they would ask me for project files. And you're like, okay, well, if you want me to prep that package, it's going to cost a certain amount. And they just go ballistic. They're just like, what? You're going to charge me for this? Well, what are you talking about? And it's a whole other can of worms where you're like, definitely next time we'll ask at the beginning of the project and put that as a line of the budget there. And a lot of the times, a couple of times I did have to just hand over the files because they would just be not angry about, but like really, especially if it's like a client that you have worked from consistently, you don't want to, kick the hornet's nest and never get work done again because you didn't give them the files that you already have. And I see I've talked to a lot of my friends who are freelancers. They struggle with the same thing. They can never get appropriate pay for basically giving out their secrets, their files of how it's all done. So
this is why I encourage contracts.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Hayley.
Haley, are you still selling that bundle?
Exactly.
Yes.
Everyone needs that bundle.
It's going away on Friday.
It makes it
I'm
so
killing
much
it.
easier to tell a client, I can't do that. You signed a contract. You read the contract, and I said that I wouldn't do that in the contract, right?
Yeah.
It just makes it so much easier to say no, right?
Yeah, it's that freelance version of what we talked about when you go staff and there's a negotiation process. The freelance version of that is, okay, how many people actually just verbally get an agreement that you're booked off of a hold, and they take that, but they do no contracts. They don't negotiate kill fees. They don't negotiate overtime or weekend rates. They have no verbiage or even a verbal discussion about, you're hiring me to sit in this chair and do this, but if you need what I made, that's going to be a separate cost. And they know that because let's say a studio, Imaginary Forces, does a job for Pepsi and they've done 3 campaigns in a row. And then all of a sudden they get a call and they're like, yeah, cool, we need those files collected up. Imaginary Forces is not going to give you the last 3 years worth of files because they know they're never going to see that client again because they're going to give it to their in-house design studio, or they're going to find another studio that's cheaper. And maybe they get a call to do 1 commercial, but not the 6, 7, or 8. There's, again, value.
Exactly. That's why they're asking for those files. Because they can just hand it over to someone else who might do it cheaper or whatever in-house or something.
Or
like
do
that.
Infinite edits, right? Yeah. Have to come back to you and get an hourly rate or a day rate. We'll just have someone in-house do it.
Yeah. Right.
So
like all of a sudden they have to do TikTok versions. Yeah, exactly.
I just dropped the contract bundle into the chat. So we're actually getting rid of this, like discontinuing it, whatever you want to call it, on Friday. There's a reason for this because we could only make the UK and the US version with a lawyer in the US and a solicitor in the UK. I worked very hard on this and, spend a lot of money and time and stuff like that. And I think it's really good for the UK and the US people out there. But the problem that I was seeing was people emailing me and saying, hey, can you make one for Australia? Can you make one for Canada? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is like too much. Like I couldn't do that. And I need to have literally a lawyer on Motion Hatch staff, like, to help me kind of achieve that. It would be impossible to do it for the whole world. So why we're discontinuing it is because I feel like I want to focus more on things that can help the wider industry and stuff like that. But I do think I firmly believe in these templates. So, do get them if you want to get them now, because although I'm discontinuing it, I still believe in it. I just want to concentrate on more stuff that can help the wider community. And as I'm sure you all know, like it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to do anything. So I'm trying to like make more stuff that can help more people. But yeah, I do want people to buy it. So if you want to get it, it's there till Friday. So we can carry on. But yeah, I think like anyway, after it's gone and stuff like that, I really want people to start getting used to talking to lawyers and solicitors and that kind of thing, because through making this contract bundle, I've had so many conversations with lawyers and stuff like that, and they're not that scary, and some of them are nice and they will help you, and they don't actually charge that much. Like sometimes it is expensive, and obviously the US one is much more expensive than UK solicitors and stuff like that, just to clarify. But like they're not, you know, they will help you, and it's not like you get on the phone with them and they like instantly like give you a bill, or they shouldn't. Like they should like be able to tell you if they're going to charge you something. So I just want to make people kind of more used to that idea, and that's just part of like having a business, you know, and running your own business is kind of having these people in your back pocket, you know, lawyers, accountants, these kind of people. And you know, some of them are stuffy, some of them are boring, some of them will charge you a lot. Just find the ones that feel good to you. So I always go for people who maybe they say they work with like creatives or like influencers and stuff like that. And those kind of people, you know, the people that are putting themselves out there on social media, if you can kind of find those professionals doing that kind of thing, then they're usually a lot easier to work with. So that's just another tip.
And I think there's so many more of them that have emerged that are kind of directing their business to that market, because there's so many creative entrepreneurs that kind of have cropped up over the last couple of years, that there is kind of a market now for those people.
And there's resources too, right? Like the one thing I learned about is if you go to a lawyer with a base template of a contract, it's a lot less to get it built specific to your unique scenario versus just coming in cold with nothing. So whether it's Hayley's, or you go to something like LegalZoom and you at least pull down, you know, the base kind of boilerplate, you can get it customized. You can get it customized per like industry category, or even per each individual client. For nowhere near as much as going
charge for an hour. Is that
yeah. Yeah, so sorry, I was just replying to some like comments. But yeah, like let me just see. We wanted to talk a bit about kind of, you know, what everyone feels about, I guess, like the gender pay gap, and is that kind of coming up in the MoGraph paid me
I wish
thing?
it came up.
Because I don't think it came up more. Coming up.
I mean, the thing that spawned all of this was the publishing paid me hashtag that then kind of took over all the industries, and that really focused on the pay gap between gender and race. You know, like I think we have multiple problems of the same scale in the industry. Too many people in positions of power or owning studios or in the education system that look and talk like me, whether it's conscious, which there is definitely a lot of conscious, or there's a lot of unconscious kind of bias and direction that having a hashtag is awesome because it creates a spotlight of awareness, but it's temporary. And then the same thing in all the other hashtags we're seeing, like if it doesn't stick and it doesn't become like a sustained initiative, it's great. But this conversation happened 2 years ago. We just didn't have the hashtag and it fell into the ether when everybody got busy again. So, I mean, I'm seeing the numbers, but I feel like when I was watching the publishing paid me 3 days before MoGraph paid me, the numbers were insane. And it was across so many people. Like I'm talking like differences in advances of tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars from one group to another group. And it was amazing to just see the awareness pop up. And there's anger, which there should be, but then there's also action. I feel like it's there and the information's good, but I don't know if it's a case of people being fearful because it isn't anonymous. And I do think there are whisper channels in kind of some of the Slack channels in our industry that are probably a little bit more informative than just publicly saying it out there. But that's why I pushed mine out, just to show like people need to understand what the top side is, like the upside potential is, and then start having the conversations about like how to get there. But I would really love there to be more, man. I think there needs to be more conversation.
I need to post mine. I'm not a big Twitter person, so that's why I didn't post mine. But I need to do that because I think it's really important for me as not just a woman, but also a Black woman to put that information out there. And, you know, just the data is that for the dollar a man makes, a woman makes 79 cents, right? Yep. And then when we break that down even further, for the dollar a white man makes, a woman makes 61, a black woman makes 61 cents, insane. Right? So the odds are against me as it is. So if I don't have that data and I don't share that data, I can't empower myself and hopefully other black women and women to be able to push their numbers higher, right? Lana, you mentioned a story that, because I think a lot of people are always like, oh, is that really the case? Do you not get what everybody else pays? You mentioned a story that I need you to repeat.
Yeah, I had a really real situation with that kind of, where the pay disparity was like painfully obvious. It wasn't a job I took. It was an email. It was just like this. I don't remember what it was, agency or I don't remember. It was quite a while ago, and they just sent out this email like, "Oh, we have this project." They put the budget in there as well in their first email, being like, "Are you available these dates? This is the budget. Can you do this?" And a lot of people got that email. So I think someone on like a Slack channel asked like, "Oh, did you get an email from this place? I'm not sure. I don't know who they are. Like, has anyone worked with them?" That kind of thing. And then we got talking, and one of the guys I knew asked him like, "Oh yeah, well, what do they offer?" We kind of just kept talking about this kind of client, and it kind of ended up being that. Me, another girl, and him, I know that we all got different budgets in those emails. So they offered him, the guy, they offered him about $2,000 more than they offered me and the other girl.
Huge percentage.
So I was so shocked of that. I never, it's always at the receipts of your mind, because no one's really outwardly sexist at the moment. No one's gonna tap you on the bum in the office. Right. That's not gonna happen.
Mad Men.
Yeah, exactly. But it's all very unconscious bias. It's all very closeted type of stuff.
Passive, I feel.
Yeah, passive, and it kind of makes you be in your head a lot. You're like, am I crazy? Did this just happen, or did I do something to provoke that, or am I? Is my skill that low that they're offering me this? Like, why is this happening to me? And the answer is usually sexism or something along those lines. And that really kind of feeds into women's insecurities. That kind of just takes the wind out of you when you're like, oh, well, why did he offer me like $2,000 less than this person? It might be because of skill, or it's just kind of, it makes you think. It really does.
I think we just all have to understand that women are awesome animators as well. We're awesome designers. We can be excellent leaders, I promise you.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of this we're seeing is systematic, right? Across industries, across the world, right? And if we don't have a shift in leadership, if they're only white dudes, as you said it, Ryan, old white dudes working at a company, are they even going to have the sort of awareness to make change? So we have to get more women in these leadership positions. We have to get more women in these positions of power. It's more than just sort of sharing this data. We have to also, make sure these spaces are more inclusive, and we include a variety of voices, so that, if I guarantee you, Lana, if it was a woman that was sending you that email, there wouldn't have been that huge disparity in cost, because she wouldn't have been thinking of this sort of gender thing. She would have just been looking at your talent and your work and judging you based off of that.
It depends on the boss, depends whoever that is coming from, the top tier, which is usually white guys.
Of course. I've had so many times people look at my reel, and this is when I had a super 3D sort of reel, and yet hire me for the job, and yet still ask me, am I capable of doing the thing that they hired me to do? And I'm like, well, you saw my reel.
Yeah. Why is it
you
even
saw my work. I don't understand why you're asking me this. And I ask myself, and it's like you said, Lana, this sort of, it's very passive. It's almost like I would prefer if it would outright, so I know where I stand. So I'm not asking myself all these internal questions. Ask myself, If I were a white guy, would he have asked me that question?
No.
You know?
No, definitely
Probably
not.
not. Right, exactly. You know, but I think there's change that has to come, you know, at all sort of tiers,
Mhm.
right? And leadership is a key component of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another thing on top of that is like, a lot of people would say like, oh, well, I don't see women being active enough in promoting themselves or applying to these jobs. But I remember when I was like, even like way back, like 5 years ago, when I was looking for internships, I would, you go check out their website, you have a look at their about page, what their team was like, and if I saw that it was just white guys, I would just like really question like, do I really want to apply here? Because I'll be the
Right.
only female there,
Yeah.
and stuff is probably gonna come up. That slight sexist stuff might come up. You never know. But when you just see like a lineup and it's all guys, you're just like,
it's all a domino effect as well, right? Because we want more women to be in the industry, right? We want more Black women to be in the industry. But if we look at this industry and don't see any of us, and then we enter these rooms and don't feel like we belong because there's some people who legitimately don't want us there. How can we make that change happen? It's this sort of push and pull. Like, I want to do this. I want to be a part of this. But how can I make that happen and feel included? Right?
Yeah, that's why you need more women and people of color in higher positions. So you have that confidence to be like, I'll be accepted there. I won't have to deal with any bullshit that comes with a certain aspect, of it being more dominant by one or the other group.
For sure.
I think it's just another way that studios are losing right now by not realizing it, right? Like I think our industry, especially because we're so commercial faced, is a reflection of the community that it services, right? So if there's this frightening phenomenon that when I go and speak to a school or I go and do like a demo reel day, a lot of animation and motion design schools are more than 50-50 women, at least, like 60, 65. That, But there's this incredible drop off after. There are stats across, I think SCAD did it, but there are studies and numbers that show that within the first 18 months of graduating and getting employed, the fall off results in like a 70-30 mix between men and women. So why is there this weird inversion? And it's something that schools need to start pushing, but it's also something that people in positions like people like me as creative directors, as owners, if you walk into the thing is the agencies and the clients are changing because they have to change even faster because they have customers directly that are demanding it. But when you walk, I had a very specific experience when I went in with the ECD of a studio, and he's a 55, 60-year-old white guy that made his way in the 80s and 90s, and he walked into a room of a client, and the client is 7 women and 1 man, and he pulls the look at me, I'm the person who's going to show you everything you're doing wrong trick in the first 2 minutes. They basically, this client had a new initiative that they wanted to share with us. They were super excited. They changed their character, their brand, and they're like, we just finished this. This isn't the job, but we just wanted to share it with you because we're excited. Lights go off. They play their commercial. They come back up, and the guy's just sitting there with his arms crossed. He's like, you guys did everything wrong. Let me tell you what you guys should have done. This is going to fail. And then he went on a 3-minute diatribe. And I literally, one by one, sitting next to him, just watched the lights turn off in the eyes of every single person in the room, where I was like, your job is to read the room. And immediately, I was like, we could just leave after the first 5 minutes. Like, I knew immediately, no matter what and then he basically did that. And he's like, okay, and Ryan, go ahead and make the pitch. He's got this great story to tell you. I'm like, we should have just picked up and left, right? So even if it's just for selfish reasons, studios that only reflect one group of the education level, you have to empower people, you have to destroy imposter syndrome as much as possible at the school level, and you have to start giving examples. And it's only I feel bad because it's only going to change to a certain degree when people just say, you know what, I'm not going to work for other people, I'm going to start my own. Because you know what? There are going to be brands and companies and clients that are going to say, I'm tired of it. The same way you guys are talking about being tired of it. They're saying, you know what? I want to work with a woman-led motion design studio. I want to work with a studio that reflects our needs and our client and our audience. And if all the big names aren't doing it, that's a huge opportunity. It's scary, and it takes a huge amount of capital and investment. But that's one way it's going to change, is you beat them at their own game.
I don't know if anyone does this, but whenever I see like a really popular piece that's like, you know, on Vimeo, Stuff Picks, whatever, done by a big, great studio everyone likes, and there's no women in the animation credits.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, in design there's usually one or two, or you know, but
and that goes back to like Disney days, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I see that, like I probably am doing myself a disservice of like keeping tabs of that.
Right.
But every time I do, I'm just disappointed because there's like literally one, maybe none women in the animation credits, and I don't know where that is coming from. Do they not have the resource to find them, or are
it's an echo chamber? It's
is
an
it
echo
just
chamber.
like
So many
because, you know,
resources too at
someone
this
who's
point,
hiring,
right?
Yeah.
What makes
If it's not conscious,
I think a lot of the reason I went independent was so I can remove this ceiling that I felt my head popping up against, that I felt had a lot to do with the fact that I was Black and a lot to do with the fact that I was a woman, and there's nothing I can do about that. I am who I am.
That's why
right?
I went freelance as well, partially.
Exactly. But I appreciate what you said, Ryan, about, you know, sort of changing, because studios, I think, also still need to do better, right?
Absolutely.
And, you know, we can go independent, but they also need to change things internally. And I think a lot of that change, and a lot of the reason I myself have been able to, you know, push my rates and understand what I deserve is because I had mentors, I had allyship. When I did work internally in studios, I had people who protected me and understood that this person has talent, this person has possibilities, let's curate this, let's help her grow. You know, and I think a lot of studios are missing out where they're not doing that. The people inside of these studios are not doing that. And it's okay if you look different from me. A lot of my mentors were white guys. You know, and as the numbers stack up, it's just your mentor might be a white guy, and that's okay. You know, I think it's you know, I think a lot of folks inside these studios need to understand that, you know, if you really want to be a part of moving the needle and change, you have to also think about who am I intentionally helping and mentoring and providing to and bringing in under my wing and hiring, right? And really helping to, you know, grow their talent. You know, you have to really think about that, and it's important to do that, or else, you know, again, we're not going to move these needles at all. Right.
I mean, the one thing I do want to call bullshit on with creative directors and art directors is the excuse I would hear all the time is, well, there aren't any Black guys to hire. Handel and Sakani got hired already. Right. That's what I hear all the time. Is like, and that just strikes me as just like tokenism, or, you know, like when you need somebody and the two people you normally call aren't available because they're booked somewhere else, you go and do the work of finding them. Right. And thankfully now, finally, that excuse is bullshit, because I can type in #DrawingWhileBlack or #AnimatingWhileBlack, or hopefully in the next few weeks and months, there'll be databases and there'll be spreadsheets and there'll be websites and there'll be organizations where you're not doing it, and you're not doing it to hire one. I had this great term told to me by a wonderful woman. I don't know if she coined it or not, but she said the next step is to avoid Highlander syndrome, because what's going to happen is, as a Black artist or as a female artist, you're going to be courted right now because you need to hire one. You need to have one on the about page. And then now you're going to feel like you're taking jobs away from your fellow Black people or fellow women, and you're going to feel guilty, and you need to push past that because you can't have this. And there can only be one Highlander syndrome mentality. You need to go and find the allies, and you need to push, and unfortunately still have to carry this burden, even if you do get hired, that like you're the first person in, you're the tip of the spear. But it's an unfortunate burden on some of the people who are already being marginalized right now that they have to carry. But it will change. It is going to change. The customers will demand it. The clients will demand it. The world will demand it. But that's why maybe sometimes when you get courted by somebody for freelance and you look at their about page and there's no one that looks like you, and you have somebody else to choose from, that's another way to make a choice. That's another negotiation to talk about what we talked about before. Is that, like, you know, I'm seeing more and more movie stars and directors demanding inclusion writers on films and TV shows that say, I have a little bit of station. I have a little bit of power. I'm not going to work on your show unless there's at least a percentage of people as a start. I don't know if it's ever going to get to that place in motion design, but you do have a choice that you could say, I'm working with this company because it's more diverse, or it reflects more of the people I want to work with.
Yeah, I just want to mention a great channel as well. I don't think a lot of people might not know about it, but Deborah, I can't remember her second name, but her channel's called Black Woman Animator. It's really, really, really good, and she interviews a lot of Black animators and stuff like that. And I just think that's like, she's just doing a great job, and she put out a great post about, you know, how you can do your research to hire more Black people and stuff like that. So I think, you know, just knowing about those kind of things too, for me, is really helpful. So I think I just, you know, I like to give her a shout out because I think she's doing a great job, and more people should go and subscribe to her channel and stuff.
I will say, just to put a button on it, that it is a personal responsibility. I think of places like School of Motion or Motionographer or any of the places that are doing things like this, live streams or YouTube interviews, that that is honestly one of the reasons why I didn't go to an Apple or a Facebook or just another motion design studio, because there are so many people that want to do the stuff that don't know how to get in or how to get up that chain. Or also there are people that, just like you said, aren't reflected in the work, that don't even know motion design is a thing, right? Like, it's one thing to know that there's a door that you get that's kind of open, to open it more. But the other thing is just letting people know that this exists, right? Like, lots of people know about animation. Lots of people know about visual effects and movie making. Motion design just as a thing is so young and so new that, you know, when I look and I see Drawing While Black, or I see amazing comic book artists or graphic designers or people working in TV animation, we should be going after those people to work in our industry, right? But we don't. We sit in the echo chamber. We don't highlight them. We don't tell their stories. We don't give them the platform. That is something that I want to do at School of Motion, and I think it's a challenge that we need to make to everybody that does podcasts or YouTube videos or tutorials, to spotlight and share as much as possible.
Ryan, quick question to you. Do you think, because everyone's talking about how the day rates are a lot higher in the US than in the UK, what's your opinion on like the student debt situation? Because that is a lot more of a burden on people in the US than it is in the UK. And could you talk a bit about that?
I mean,
does
going
that
back
kind
to
of correlate a bit with
I think it absolutely does, because it goes back to that equation of like opportunity, value, and risk, right? When you walk out with a $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 weight on you, you can't take the risks that someone who has no debt, right? Like, you maybe do have to take that staff job that puts you in a company that may not have people that look like you, or allies or mentors, that you're working on boring stuff that doesn't let you grow because you're like, I gotta pay it off. And I'm not turning this into an advertisement for School of Motion, but I think that there are
we are a Motion Hatch channel, you know. No, I'm joking.
Right?
I think that there are so many more avenues for not just learning the tools, but for, like what you said, Monique, for mentorship and allyship, in terms of like creating examples that it's possible, but also knowing what you can do or who you can talk to, right? Like, we know inherently, as people have been working for a while, that networking is probably as big as your skill set, right? Your reputation and the people that can lift you up and help you. But there's so many people that don't know that because they can't get into SCAD. They can't get to Ringling. They can't get to those places where they can't take the financial hit to create that network that hopefully now, you know, things like Motion Hatch, things like the Slack channels, things like, you know, people doing YouTube and offering, you know, mentorships or just Zoom calls. I do think, Lana, that's it's a huge consideration, right? Because there's a lot of people who still don't know that they can do this without having to take out.
You can't really try out animation if your debt is going to be what you're saying.
Exactly.
In the UK, it's a bit more lax. It's like, if you're unemployed, you kind of don't have to pay it. Or if you move to another country, I could move back to Estonia, where I'm originally from, and I don't have to pay it. So there's a lot less. You can like try animation. You can go to like try design course and do another thing. And
there's one thing that I came up against as well. Is that thing where there's a lot of unpaid internships still like going around, and like when I came out of university, I couldn't afford to do that because I was moving to London or whatever, and so I just had to get like a job, and it wasn't a great job in like a cool animation studio. It was like a,
Right.
you know, like a junior graphics coordinator, like a sports company, because and I hate sport, and I just took that job because it paid, right? But there was like internships around, like at like cool studios, but then they wouldn't be paid, and I'm like, well, I just can't take that because I don't live in London.
I remember
not
going
from
to
there.
those kind of interviews. Yeah. I was looking for an internship before I found one anime that did pay. Even though it wasn't like crazy well paid, I still had to work weekends and stuff like that to just make the London rent, you know?
Yeah.
But I went to a lot of those interviews where they don't outwardly tell you if they're going to pay you or not. So you have to go into their door and sit down with them to even find that out, you know? So once you kind of get to that conversation, they kind of give you a tour, show you around, show how lovely, amazing this is. And usually that's the last thing you kind of ask, like, well, so what's going on?
Right.
And then they say like, no, well, come in whenever you want. It's not paid. And I think one of the studios, they don't exist anymore, which is quite good. Yeah, they don't exist anymore. But like, I was like, can you at least pay my lunches?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, sorry, we can't do that. So they couldn't even do that. It's a terrible situation. And I was not in a position to take an internship like that. But some people would. Some people would be like, I'm going to work evenings, weekends, whatever other free time they have, and still try to go to that unpaid place because they're desperate for to get in, you know.
But I think it's such a good question that you brought up, because besides the personal kind of effect that it has, I really, and I hope it doesn't feel like a conspiracy theory, but at like a macro social economic level, the people who create the culture that affects the way we all look at ourselves, it's only accessible by the people who can afford to play the game, right? When I go to Cal Arts or I go to Art Center, there's a certain set of people that can afford to go there, but those people are also the people that get fast tracked to the art director and creative director positions. So it's not only the advantage that they have the money, it's not only the advantage that they have the network, it's also just the fact that like that group of people all of a sudden gets fast tracked into the position where they say, no, Lana, you know what? We're not going to do that because I don't think our audience would understand that. Or Monique, that's too black. I'm sorry. Like we have to speak to everyone, right? So it is this almost like insidious.
Too curvy.
Insidious, yeah, exactly.
Curvy, right?
Too curvy, not wide enough. All those things that you heard the note that there's actually a note behind it. Yeah, exactly. And then you wonder why the world looks the way it does, and you end up seeing this societal kind of waterfall. And that's not just in motion design or animation. That's in filmmaking, right? That's in the print world. That's in photography. That
every industry.
It's the whole creative world is, to a certain degree, because of access and gatekeeping, a self-selecting set of people who, whether they mean to or not, control what we all consume and observe and see. And that's why things like grants or scholarships or initiative programs, the only way that it can start, right? Like the hashtag is great, the initiatives come on, but then the sustained pressure from everyone is the only way it really, like, there's any kind of real change, right? Like I turned Netflix on yesterday, and for the first time I saw collections, and it was a collection of 41 films by Black filmmakers. And I was like, why did it take this?
Why are we just now getting here?
Enough?
This has all been in your library for ages.
Right. And you know what? There's a whole set of stuff I never see because I'm not watching kids content, that when I did look for a cartoon, all of a sudden there's like 400 hours worth of kids cartoons. And the same thing is for films by Black filmmakers. Like Criterion just decided to make historically I think it's like 52 films or 53 films made by Black filmmakers free. So you don't even have to have access to the service, but you're like, it takes that big of a business change and a cultural change to really start the conversation really happening. So I mean, it's not an easy one size fits all solution.
I would just like to say, from my point of view, like as a relatively quite small company in the motion design industry, like what's been going on has really affected me, and I really want to like help and be part of the change, and I'm just like racking my brains all the time, like how can I, what can I do to kind of showcase more people, and definitely like be more mindful about the different kinds of people that I get on the podcast and all that kind of stuff. And these are the things that I've been thinking about, but I'd love to like engage like some other people in the industry and like maybe some of the bigger companies, and like maybe we can like band together and do stuff. I don't know, you know what I mean? These are just like ideas that I had, and I'm always open like to anyone in the industry, like come and have a conversation with me about anything. I just think like
I think that that sort of accessibility, you're speaking about, how expensive schools can be, and that kind of creates this barrier. And then even not having that sort of understanding of the fact that even motion design is a thing, right? I know for me growing up, I was really so fortunate that my family, my parents were so supportive of my sort of decision to be an artist, right? And I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but they didn't care. Whatever I wanted to do was cool by them, right? But unfortunately, there aren't a lot of Black people that have that experience, right? I was in art school, in high school, in art class with, so many Black artists. I'll never forget, someone I was really close friends with. She was an incredible artist. I could see her doing matte paintings. I could see her in, doing so many different things in the industry, but she couldn't see herself in that position. I asked her, hey, where are you going to high school or college? What are you going to study? Where are you going to study art? Because I'm just assuming, she's so awesome that she's going to do that. She's like, art, there's no, that's not a thing. I can't, I'm not going to do that. How am I going to, that's not an actual job that I can have, That's
so it's not even a possibility.
Doesn't that blow your mind? So I think so much of it is, so much of what we're all talking about, sort of the accessibility of education, which I think we're seeing, offering grants. Because also I feel like, sometimes in a lot of instances, a college experience doesn't necessarily trump, which is so antiquated now. Using trump anymore as a term.
I can't even use that word.
Cannot use that word anymore. It doesn't necessarily, X out the sort of experience of like an online school, because we have some really great online schools where you can learn these things, right? But kind of having these grants and also doing outreach, going to these schools. So these talented kids know this exists, right? Especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a Black woman, go to these schools and let them see you, that you exist and you do this for a living and you're doing all right, Yeah. I think it's just so much that we have to hit all the prongs, because you also don't want to get to the place where, you've gotten to an age now where you feel like you don't want to make that pivot, right? So we have to reach those kids, right? Get them in high school, elementary, middle school, so they can start even thinking about this possibility and start to really hone their craft and make those decisions, So there's so many sort of like touch points we have to hit.
Can I make one just like really, we talk about a lot of heady stuff and we're trying to get our heads around like big picture, like it's gonna take years for things to maybe change if people can even sustain it. But can I make just like a very specific, like just tactical suggestion for people? A lot of people are looking at the hashtag drawing while Black or animating while Black, or seeing people on Instagram and they're retweeting them or they're liking them or they're giving them words of encouragement, which is really needed. But I think like for our industry, what we were just talking about, something you can do very, very specifically is when you like something, don't like it, don't just retweet it. Like retweet it with a comment or share it on Instagram and tag a studio that you think their work would be amazing for. Right? Like I've just started doing this thing where I find an artist and like, you know what, like Oddfellows should have this person design style frames, or this person could push Buck another level, because it'll do two things, right? Like studios are always trying to find new people, right? And if you do it in a public forum and they get tagged, it's going to look good if they reply, right? So they're going to want to reply. But two, it does this other thing where people who don't even know that this is a possibility, like how many people do you know that don't, even though we think Buck is ubiquitous or whatever studio, right? Golden Wolf. So many people that could be used, but they don't even know that that's a door to knock on, right? And just very simply, 10 more seconds of what it takes to just hit retweet. Just be like, man, Golden Wolf, have you heard of this guy? He should be working there. Or this artist would be amazing to work at Elastic. And if that builds up enough momentum and enough, like you can see actual real change by getting somebody who didn't know about the industry or a company that didn't know about someone in a very simple way that I would love to see more of that than just the blind retweet or this is awesome or never met this person before.
Yeah, actually there's a studio called The Line, if any of you know it. And they had an amazing I guess it's a podcast, but it's on the YouTube. They've talked about the Black Lives Matter movement and everything, kind of, because one of the owners is Black, and they're kind of talking about how they conduct their business and what kind of, you know, inner thoughts are kind of going through that, with kind of going with that. I wish more studios were open to kind of having those conversations. I mean, a lot of them won't be because they know they're full of shit, but a lot of
They don't want to
studios
be
that
called out,
everyone
right?
everyone respects, they I think they would have a lot of value to say about that, even if they're not quite there in making those strides. It would be nice to see them talk about it, not just, you know, post black squares and make their logo black. You know, that's kind of, it's nice, but it's not enough at this point in our history. It's not enough.
I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of Black artists, creative business owners over the past couple of weeks, and you know, everyone's happy. You know, it's kind of this conflicting sort of feeling of, yes, I'm glad that, you know, I have more business and all, or more follows and I'm getting the support, right? But that has to translate to what you're saying, right? Of business, right? Of
hire people.
Hire people,
them.
right? Yes. It's just you know, follows and likes. That's awesome, but make sure that translates to not just commerce, but everlasting, right? Because this is a wave that we're having that I do feel like this is different. You know, I think everyone's kind of unified right now in a way that we haven't been before, which I think is incredible. But there's going to inevitably be people who kind of drop off and are on to the next story, right? And we have to make sure that, you know, in a year, we're still kind of thinking about hiring Black artists the way we're thinking about it now, right?
We have to generate critical mass that this becomes a thing that is sustainable, but also has a more than gentle pressure on the places not doing that, right? Like, it needs to change fast enough now that if you put 4 studios next to each other and one stands out because it's one shade, that there's an embarrassment there, there's a shame there, and that they feel like they have to do something because it feels
not forceful, but it's needed.
And be in that position, you know, own it, because that's how you have to. You're not gonna make change if you don't realize where you are right now, right? And some of these studios not talking about it, it's probably because they know if we come to the conversation, people are gonna be like, well, when I worked there, there was no Black people, so what are you even doing, right? But I think you have to kind of own that and understand that, we haven't been doing right for a long period of time. We need to do better, you know, as opposed to just not having a conversation, because then change really isn't going to happen.
Right. And it's
they'll still be called out on it. It's just it's just like not getting defensive about not being like, well, we're doing our best, whatever, this blank email that they sent to everyone. Is just kind of having that conversation, figuring it out without kind of hurting anyone's feelings, be it one or the other side.
Yeah, well, that hourglass that just flipped over in the last week or two, it's going to quickly run out, and the ability to say, I just didn't know they were out there, is going to run out very quickly, because you hear that all the time, and it's you don't want to denigrate anybody, because I mean, there are real discoveries happening right now. We all are. Everyone is finding new people that they didn't know were there, right? Yeah. But like that time for when it's acceptable to just say, I didn't know they're there, and 2 retweets, that's not going to be enough in short order. Soon there needs to be real change.
I was just thinking, like, because I know that we're having this conversation now, and, you know, obviously like 2 education companies and then like freelancers and stuff like that, that tends to be what the thing is, right? Like it's like, you know, like Motion Hatch, MoGraph Mentor, School of Motion, like, and then like all the freelancers. And then sometimes it feels like the studios and stuff are like separate from us. I don't know whether I'm just like imagining that, but like, and maybe it's like my fault too, you know, that I'm not engaging enough studio owners to come on my podcast. And do you see what I mean? Like, I was just, as we were talking about studio, like, because obviously it's not like, it shouldn't be like a you know, us and them. Like I always say, like with your clients, it shouldn't be like, oh, they're the clients and, you know, like I've got to just get the most money from them and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, I think like, I don't know. I feel like I need to get these people more in on these conversations, you know, like I was looking through the mographpaidme and hashtag, and I saw one studio like put up, oh, this is what we pay our artists. And then I was trying to find that again because I wanted to get them to come on this, and then I couldn't find it, and I was really annoyed.
Somebody deleted it. Yeah.
They took it
maybe,
down.
maybe. I don't know. I couldn't find it.
I hope there's a screenshot that lives somewhere.
Yeah, if someone
Yeah,
knows
it's
who
hard,
it is.
isn't it? Because like one of the things, like you don't just want to interview the top layer of white guys,
Yeah.
and then them
Absolutely.
pushing their message. But at the same time, I've noticed on that hashtag, like people who like actively are full time somewhere, they can't really share that information. You know,
Right.
it's an absolutely uncomfortable thing to share and might
Yeah.
ruin your relationship with your company. So it's kind of like it's hard to find that in between, isn't it? Because it is an organization. There's different levels to it. So maybe on the top layer, it's all fine and dandy, but at the mid intern level or something like that, it might be completely not as it should be, and you will never find that out.
You know what, though? I agree, but I think that a smart studio would realize this is an incredible opportunity, because the real competition coming up, to go back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, the real competition coming up for studios, especially older studios, isn't necessarily just for clients. It's for the artists, right? Like trying to get the artists you need to be able to compete at the level you've competed on before. It is much harder, especially when you're talking about New York and LA. It is much harder to find the talent you need right now. It's so competitive. And if you can find a way to pitch yourself out to the community that you're the studio that's open about rates, you're the student that's transparent about your faults in the past, here's your actual plan of action to how to address that. That is a huge opportunity for a studio to rebrand, the same way a brand or a client right now that's struggling with something has an opportunity to just own up to it. Be honest, be the different choice, be the one that's handling this in a way that's not shameful and isn't just reactive, but is honest and trying to change. I think there's a huge opportunity for people
companies have this amazing space right now, but I don't see a lot of them taking that chance yet. Hopefully it will change.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I just don't think there's like enough like chat between people. It always seems to be like there's very like much a community between like freelancers and stuff like that, and like the education kind of companies, like I said. But yeah, I'm not seeing like too much chat. I mean, I'm just trying to think like off the top of my head. I got interviewed Carl Doran recently from Flow Creative in Manchester, like, but he has like quite a small studio, but he's really awesome and stuff like that. You know, but I can't really think of like tons of people that I'm like,
they're talking.
oh, you know, like maybe they talk between themselves, but I can't.
They do. I can tell you, they
know.
have their own. I mean, I'm literally in a group of people like your mastermind, but for business owners and in this industry for the current time, and they're definitely talking, but they're talking about COVID. They're talking about like how to restructure business. They're talking about how to keep 2 studios open if they have, 2 offices. And as much as this is hitting us, I honestly don't think that this is on a lot of shop owners' radar right now. And again, that's unfortunate that the marginalized people have to carry the burden of the awareness and the discovery and then push for action. But I do honestly think that right now, like there may be an awareness, right? Like, we might have a problem, but right now I got to keep the doors open. They may even have a couple of people who are starting to have those moments of discovery of like, oh, there's this whole swath of people and artists that I've never, entertained or talked to or discovered before. But the moment for action is coming soon, I think. And I think it's going to require us, the artists and the educators, to gently push for it and then begin to demand for it and then decide who you want to work for if the action isn't taken.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like we've been on here for a long time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just wary of everybody's time.
Oh my God, what is that? 2 hours? What?
Nearly. We're
Getting
getting close to 2 hours.
Were there any other good questions, Hayley, that you saw that popped up?
Yeah, it was just because I've been trying to like talk to you guys and then obviously look at the questions as well, which I think is a little bit tricky. Yeah. Yes. Someone was asking, has there anyone here had experience doing motion graphics on a monthly retainer? If so, were there things you learned that you thought you'd do differently regarding payment structures? I can tell you that people in our mastermind program are like trying to do monthly retainers and stuff like that now, but I don't know whether anyone here has battled with that.
Yeah, I have, and I think the most obvious thing I would do differently is really stipulate in my contract what encompassed that sort of monthly retainer rate. Because I started having them come to me and be like, well, can we have this 3D thing and this and that? And I'm like, think to myself, if I would have charged them project rate for this thing, it would have been much more than what the monthly retainer was, right? So then, you know, it's, you know, there is that security in having a monthly retainer, obviously, but then you don't want to sort of end up doing a whole lot of work that you wouldn't have done if you had, you know, charged them a project rate. So I think really kind of stipulating in a contract what this consists of. If it falls without that scope, then it'll be more, you know, or we have to go to a project rate or something like that.
Yeah, I feel really strongly about retainers the same way I do about project rates. And it's similar to what Monique said. Like, if it is a trusted relationship with someone who has your interest as well as their interest in mine, and it is enumerated in a contract specifically what it's for, I would still be very cautious, because what ends up happening beyond what you were just talking about is you'll also find yourself being used as like the in-house design person or design studio. And you may not know it, but what ends up happening is the cool, juicy assignments that are ways to build real standing relationships with the creatives in that brand or that company or the decision makers, you automatically get disqualified for, because you're this is the person who can do my variants.
Some
this
video
is the person
editing.
You just look like a staff member that's cheaper because you're remote.
Yeah.
And you may never even know it, right? Like that opportunity versus risk. You may not even know the opportunities you're losing for that small sense of stability, even just within just that one. And then I would also caution, like, if you are taking that, you also may end up having to turn down other work from other people that come in just for, again, like stability is great, but it also has its own risks, and just always consider that, because on top of what Monique was saying, I would also put like quarterly review sessions for what you did for the retainer, and have it be in the contract that they will be reevaluated for either your ability to wind out of it or to ratchet up what you should be getting paid for, because you're still in a discovery phase when you start a retainer. Retainers are one of those things where it's like, it's awesome when you're dating and considering it, but the moment you get married, you see the real reality. And sometimes it's great, but more often than not, it's not good for either side. So I'd be very careful. Just be very, very careful.
I love that, because a lot of the reason I've actually been cautious about re-entering any sort of retainer agreement is because of that, is because I felt like I don't want this to go on forever if I'm not feeling this anymore. And I don't want this to be an awkward breakup, you know, if we decide to end this. So I love that sort of quarterly review, so we can all be on the same page of that. This isn't just an indefinite thing, you know. We have to decide if this is still working for everyone involved.
Yeah, they could be asking you to like lower the budgets with every project, and by the end of it is like you're almost doing it for free. So it could kind of gradually, without you knowing, kind of go down and down and down.
Yeah,
you got to give yourself permission to treat yourself like a business, even when the businesses you're interacting with don't act like businesses, right? That's the one thing I try to remind myself, is a lot of these motion design studios, they're just people 5 years further along their careers than you are, right? They didn't go to business school. They don't know how to run a company. They're learning it the same way you're learning how to run as a freelancer, right? So when you have those moments that you can actually interact with someone who's running a business and you seem more legit and more put together and more business oriented than them, I think that changes the conversation. And even going back to the kind of like people taking advantage of it, feels, I know because I've seen on the other side, there's a check mark that goes in your hand. It's like, you know what, I can't get away with this kind of stuff with this person. And sometimes that's great, because there's they know in the relationship, there's no bullshit. They know they can trust you because you run yourself like a company, and you don't run yourself like the freelancer who says he can come in on Tuesday, shows up on Wednesday, is watching Netflix all day Thursday, and then ghosts you on Friday, right? Like there's just a different, when you show up with one of Hayley's contracts, or you show up to the conversation of like, so what's the retainer going to, like, there's just a different interaction style that you create by doing that.
Yeah,
I've had so many clients be kind of like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing here. We got contracts, we got production step. This is a tight ship you're running over here. You know,
can I hire you as my producer?
That's why. Yeah, this is why I'm so like enthusiastic about, you know, Motion Hatch and trying to teach people the business side of motion design and like how to freelance. you know, as if
Yep.
you're running a business, because you are running a business if you're a freelancer. And I'm going to
Even
keep
like
saying
universities are not
Yeah.
doing well in that front. Like when I have a degree in animation, and it took like 3 years, and we had like one session with a woman from the Illustrators Union. That wasn't even like motion design centric, and she was telling us like what to charge, or how to kind of start charging. And that was like just really odd. It's just like, how do I put this into motion? And there was no talk about contracts, anything. It was all about the creative, how to be amazing superstar, but not about how to run it as a business. It was all about like, make good work and go work in a company, like find a company to just like be there. It was never about like making it work for you.
Yeah, I've done a few talks at different universities and stuff like that. It's definitely something that I'd like to do more of, because I think that people aren't even like you say, aware of this stuff. And even like just freelance motion designers, if you just go and talk to like a group of animation students or something like that, or a group of illustration students, you know, there's not like there are a few motion design courses now, but there's more like animation, illustration, things like that. So that kind of, I feel like Monique was saying earlier, like these, you know, these people kind of come under this, what's the word? Like, you know, they could all come into our industry as well, basically. So I think it's us all trying to take responsibility a bit more of trying to engage the student community a bit as well, which I know that I definitely need to do that too. Because it's really easy to be online and just go around in this like online bubble and be like, oh yeah, we all know who is here, and we're like talking to each other and stuff like that. But I think sometimes some of the students don't know about. And I just remember when like I was in my first job, and you know, like Nick Campbell like did his Grayscale Gorilla podcast, and like that had a big effect on me. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like it was like kind of the start of the online stuff, and obviously like Andrew Kramer and stuff like that. Let's not forget about him. But you know, like just people like start having more of these conversations. And even if you're just a freelance motion designer and you're not like an educator, you know, you can still do that. You know, you can still go and talk to your local university that you went to or whatever. Like I'd like to encourage people to do that as well.
Yeah, that's great, because whenever I go to universities, they always just ask me to talk about my work.
Right.
Exactly.
But that always kind of, I never talk about the business side of it. So it's definitely worth being like a big chunk of it.
Yeah.
Universities are the curriculum is dated, man. You have a freelancer who has this sort of business sense, and you invite her to just speak about her work. That's so, you know, where's the depth there? You know,
that's where I think it's a little bit on us, right? Like a student or the parents of a student don't even have the language skills to know what they should be expecting or demanding, but we do, right?
Yeah.
Like I think whether it's your alma mater or it's a school you trust, or you know what, I think a lot of times schools just reach out to people like us for like a real review, just because it's an easy lift for them and they look cool for it. But if you do that, if you have a partnership with a school, I think it's okay to kind of expect and demand that they prep students for the real world, right? It shouldn't just be on the online schools or YouTube channels or people like Hayley. Like, if you're getting used by a school to help them do their job, you should be able to have an audience with them, be like, look, like you're not prepping them. You know, like one less After Effects class and one business class would make the industry itself so.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Did we lose Ryan?
Maybe.
Yeah. Stuck.
What he was saying was profound.
It was really great. Yeah.
Too profound for the internet connection.
Oh, you're back. Is he back?
I think he's coming back.
Oh, we lost it. Oh, he's back.
Am I there?
Yeah, you're back.
There you are.
That was Scad.
Scad just saying, and then you just
Scad just hacked into the stream and shut me down. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, well, I think oh, go on, Monique. Sorry.
No, I was just telling Ryan, finish your thought. I mean, unless you did.
Oh, I think that's it. I think just we're pointing fingers at a lot of other people, but I think we can also be accountable, even just as animators, freelancers. graduated working for 2 years, you have an important voice in the people a year or two behind you, like how they get prepped for it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always trying to tell people that, like, remember that you can, like, turn around to the people behind you, you know, who know a little bit less than you, even if it's just like you've done something for like a couple of more months than they have, you know, and like try and teach some of the people. And I personally got a lot out of teaching others, and that's why I'm doing this kind of stuff now, even though sometimes it's scary, you know, sometimes it's scary for us to go live on YouTube or to go on a podcast and things like that. But if people are asking you to do that, you should definitely do it, because
everyone's experience is valuable, isn't it?
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Some people feel like they don't have something to say, you know. I come up against that a lot, and I'm like, no, you do. I really want you to come on the show, you know, and that kind of thing. So if people are asking you to do this kind of stuff, please do it, because it does get easier, you know.
Yeah.
So
I absolutely agree, and I encourage, you know, all motion designers, especially if you're a minority in the field, if you're a woman in the field, to go to schools that, you know, middle schools, high schools, and speak to these kids and let them know, you know, the possibilities, you know, because a lot of them just have no idea, no clue that this is even a thing, you know, and can identify it, see it on TV and like, oh, I love that. But they don't know what that means to pursue that career. So I absolutely encourage, you know, and, you know, it's super easy. Just send an email. Usually they're super jazzed to have you come down and speak to, and they have some sort of art program. And actually a lot of these schools are getting very advanced and have like some 3D program or something like this, you know, and you could speak to them and really, you know, make sure they see you and know that this is a real tangible possibility for them.
Yeah, fight that imposter syndrome and get yourself out there.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. That's the biggest thing. That's what we're always talking about. What I'm talking about to people all the time, imposter syndrome. This is what it comes down to. This is what all the charging stuff comes down to and everything like that. Like, some of it is education for sure, and some of it might be your skills and stuff like that. But a lot of it is just like we were all saying, we all pretty much shared our stories of like imposter syndrome and like not knowing what to charge and that kind of thing. But it all does come down to that all the time, and I'm always talking about it because I'm just really passionate about it, because I feel like that all the time myself anyway. Like, everybody does, and if they say they don't, they're lying, or they're just weird. But like, you know, everybody feels that way. So just everyone who's watching, know that everyone feels like an imposter, and you're not an imposter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how early or far in your career. I feel like it's always there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up since we've been here for 2 hours. But I really appreciate this. This has been really awesome, and I'm really pleased that we jumped over to YouTube to do this live. So if people are watching and you enjoyed this, I'm going to do this kind of thing every week, sometimes on my own, sometimes with guests. So please do, you know, give us a subscribe and all of that good stuff, so you can figure out when it's going on. And, you know, yeah, we've got, if you go to motionhatch.com/community, you can sign up to the newsletter, and then obviously you'll see when all of these kind of live things are happening and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you very much, Monique, Ryan, and Lana. This has been really excellent, and I know we organized it last minute, so I just want to say thanks so much. I really appreciate you giving up your time like this.
Yeah, it's been a good convo.
Yeah, I enjoyed
thanks for having us.
Cool. All right, everybody. See you later. Bye.
Bye.